I'm going live.
Okay.
Here's chocolate for you. Hello, everybody. This is Empowering Democracy, and I'm your host, Joe Firestone. Okay, this is our show about the international system and geopolitics that we do every Tuesday. And our topic for tonight on Empowering Democracy is saving Israel and the geopolitics, of it all. I'm going to start off tonight by covering a piece from Jeff Sachs, who's one of the leading thinkers on international relations right now. And he published a piece which he talked about on Andrew Napolitano's show, but which is also an article. I saw it on Common Dreams, and I put it up in the... I put it up. You should be seeing it. I'm going to share it on Facebook now before I start to talk about it. No, come on. Everything is popping all over the place here, and stopping me from sharing it. Okay. Here I go. So that's it. It's up there for you to see. And there's an Israeli soldier carrying a tank shell after returning from the Gaza Strip on January 1st, 2024. And by the way, Happy New Year, everybody. On the southern border, Israel has extended its offensive into densely populated neighborhoods in central Gaza, forcing a French wave of displacement to the south. Obviously, what Israel is trying to do is to chase all the Palestinians into the desert. And those they don't chase in, they will kill. The title of this piece is Saving Israel by Ending Its War in Gaza. And the Israeli government argues that it is in a mortal fight for survival against Hamas, and therefore must take every measure, including the very destruction of Gaza, to survive. This is false, says Jeffrey D. Sachs. And again, this was published in Common Dreams yesterday on January 1st, 2024. When Congress returns in January, President Joe Biden will push the case to deepen American complicity in Israel's war in Gaza through another U.S. armaments package for Israel. And Jeffrey Sachs says Americans should raise their voice in a resounding no. An arms package for Israel is not only against America's interests, but also against Israel's interests. The only path to real security for Israel is peace with Palestine. The U.S. can help bring this about by ending the supply of weapons for Israel's brutal war, and by promoting a two-state solution as called for by international law. Spelled out the diplomatic path to the two-state solution in the previous column for Common Dreams. That path remains open. It is actively promoted by the Arab and Islamic countries and supported by nearly the entire world. Israel's brutality in Gaza is becoming a true threat to Israel's survival. And I agree, I hold the same opinion. I can see opinion all around me changing on the subject of Israel's survival. People who 6 months ago would have been foursquare behind the continued survival, of Israel, now, are in Palestine's corner, completely, in the Palestinian corner, and they are because of the brutality, the war crimes, the collective punishment, the ethnic cleansing, and the genocidal behavior of the Israelis, in Gaza. Of course, someone's going to remind me that this was in response to Hamas's brutal attack on October 7th. We can talk about that, but if we talk about that, we have to talk about the 50 years of oppression, more than 50 years of oppression since 1967, which the Palestinians have suffered at the hands, of the Israelis. Without the context of those years, of oppression, you can't understand the Palestinian attack, on October 7th, to which the Israelis responded. If you look at it in this broader context, it's obvious that the Israeli response has been entirely disproportionate and entirely in violation of international law. Going on with the article, because of Israel's extraordinary violence, the world is uniting against Israel. Well, Israel is suffering massive military losses. Incredibly, some Israeli leaders are now openly advocating an even wider war in the Middle East, one that could well spell utter disaster for Israel. Of course, Israel knows that it would spell utter disaster for Israel, but it hopes, its plan is to drag the United States into that war in order to avoid the utter disaster for Israel. As a citizen of the United States, I'm not interested in being dragged into that wider war. I want Israel to make peace with its neighbors and to leave us out of it. The surging global opposition, because it's not in the interest of the United States to go in there. That is a wider regional war, would be completely against, the interest of the United States and would only further unmask our lack of military capability to win a war there. The surging global opposition to Israel's policies is not anti-Semitic, it is anti-genocide. It is also pro-peace, pro-Israel, and pro-Palestine. Need I mention, incidentally, both Jeffrey Sachs and I are Jewish. If Israel ends, the genocide, it will end the global opposition it now faces. I also want to add, neither Jeffrey Sachs nor myself thinks that we are being anti-Semitic by criticizing the Israeli regime and its behavior since October 7th and before. Defeating Hamas is not Israel's real aim in Gaza, says Jeffrey. The Israeli government argues that it is in a mortal fight for survival against Hamas and therefore must take every measure, including the very destruction of Gaza, to survive. This is false. There is no ethical, practical, legal, or geopolitical case for destroying Gaza, killing tens of thousands of civilians and uprooting 2 million people to protect Israel against the kinds of preventable and controllable threats that Hamas actually poses. During the years 2008 to 2022, Hamas and other militants killed around a dozen Israeli civilians per year, while Israel usually killed at least 10 times more civilian Palestinians. There was a spike in 2014 when Israel invaded Gaza, with 19 Israeli civilians killed versus 1,760 Palestinian civilians. Hamas launches many rockets, but almost all are intercepted or cause little damage. Israel responds with periodic massacres, as in 2014, and with more regular airstrikes. Israelis even have a cynical name for their periodic killing, that's called, uh, quote, uh, uh, um, 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 mowing the grass, unquote. Makes me so angry I can't even say it. It is common knowledge inside Israel that Hamas long served as a, quote, low cost, unquote, political prop used by Netanyahu to, quote, prove, unquote, to Israelis that a two-state solution is impossible. I ought to say something else about the interception of the rockets. Jeff says almost all are intercepted or cause very little damage. The interception of the rockets is mostly caused by the Iron Dome defensive systems, uh, which the Israelis have gotten from the United States. But what's not mentioned too often thus far is the Israelis have now uh, begun to put online uh, something called the Iron Beam defensive system, which is a laser technology based system that will be, when combined with the Iron Dome, will constitute an even more effective system in intercepting the rockets and the missiles that come from Gaza. Ones that were not intercepted are often ones that come, are fairly low flying, and can't be picked up by the Iron Dome defense system, but they can be picked up by the Iron Beam, defensive system. So as we move forward in time, the Israeli capability to knock down the rockets Hamas has would be even more capable and would result in even fewer civilian casualties than the Israelis have had uh, in the first 20 years, of this century. In all the years of Hamas rule in Gaza after 2007, Hamas has never captured Israeli territory, much less remotely threatened Israel's existence or survival. Simply, it couldn't do so even if it wanted to. Hamas has around 30,000 fighters, compared with more than 600,000 active and reserve personnel in the IDF. Hamas lacks an air force, armored units, a military industrial base, and geographic maneuverability outside of Gaza. That's a very strong point from Jeffrey Sachs there. They lack that. On October 7th, Hamas fighters made a surprise incursion into Israel that lasted that horrific day. This did not reflect a new superability of Hamas to invade Israel, but rather a shocking failure of Israeli security. And Jeff is right about that, too. It's a very acute point to make. Israeli leaders had ignored extensive warnings of an upcoming Hamas attack and had inexplicably left the Gaza-Israel border severely undermanned. Even more astoundingly, they did so just days after Israeli extremists had stormed the Al-Aqsa Mosque complex, one of Islam's holiest sites. Hamas exploited Israel's astounding security lapse by breaching the border, an attack that led to around 1,100 Israeli civilian deaths and Hamas taking 240 hostages, with an unknown number of the Israeli civilian deaths that day caused by Israeli aerial bombing and crossfire in the IDF's counterattack. There are some estimates now that place at least half and perhaps more than half of the Israeli civilian deaths have actually estimated those deaths were caused by the Israeli counterattacks and not by Hamas itself. By refortifying the border with Gaza, Israel has stopped further ground incursions by Hamas. Netanyahu has ordered the destruction of Gaza, not to protect Israel from Hamas, but to make Gaza uninhabitable and thereby to fulfill his long-standing intention to impose permanent Israeli rule over the territory. Netanyahu gets the added bonus of clinging to power despite his grievous other failures. The Israeli government's more basic objective is to solidify its total control over, quote, Greater Israel, unquote, meaning all the land from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. Well, that's what Greater Israel means in the general sense, but there's even a more expansive concept, okay, of Greater Israel that even incorporates various parts of what is now Egypt, okay, and also Jordan, what was formerly Transjordan, okay, and also territory right up to the Euphrates, to the Euphrates River in Iraq. It's a very expansive concept of Greater Israel that is held by members of the Netanyahu government, specifically Itamar Ben-Gvir and also Bezalel Smotrich. Okay. On October 10th, Israel's defensive minister Yoav Gallant stated that, quote, Gaza won't return to what it was before. We will eliminate everything, unquote. More recently, Netanyahu spoke of, quote, voluntary emigration, unquote, of the Gazan population. Voluntary, that is, after Gaza has been laid to waste and Gazans told to evacuate. Some voluntary, huh? And Metula Mayor David Azulai declared that, quote, the whole Gaza Strip needs to be empty, flattened, just like in Auschwitz. Let it be a museum for all the world to see what Israel can do. Let no one reside in the Gaza Strip for all the world to see, because October 7th was in a way a second Holocaust, unquote. You got to ask the question, in what way was it a second Holocaust? There were 1,147 people killed. That's very serious, no question. But of course, famously, the Holocaust killed 6 million Jews. In what way can the two be compared? It is ridiculous. He later clarified that he would like to see the Gaza population, quote, relocated, unquote, not murdered. But of course, if they stay, then the Israelis are going to murder them, right? Most recently, Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, a self-declared fascist, called for Gaza's population to be cut to 100,000 to 200,000 from the current population of more than 2 million. Now that's genocide if I ever saw it. Israel aimed from the start of its invasion of Gaza to push the Gazans into Egypt, but Egypt, adamantly refused to be a party to ethnic cleansing. In the 1970s, the aim of dominating Palestine to create Greater Israel as a Jewish state was a fringe belief. It was. Now it rules Israeli policy, in part reflecting the enormous political weight of hundreds of thousands of Israeli settlers in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. Of course, we have to emphasize here, they don't even live in Israel. They live in the occupied West Bank that was supposed to be reserved for the Palestinians in the partition, of 1947. Quote, Greater Israel, defined as Israel of pre-1967 waters plus Gaza, the West Bank, and East Jerusalem, is home to roughly 7 million Jews and 7 million Palestinian Muslims and Palestinian Christians. Israel can rule Greater Israel only by dominating 7 million Palestinians or by driving them out of their homes by war, violence, and extreme discrimination. The quest for Greater Israel in practice leads Israel to commit grave crimes against the people of Palestine. The ongoing crime is apartheid rule, with its severe injustices and indignities. The graver crime is ethnic cleansing, as Israel is attempting in Gaza. The gravest of all is genocide, witnessed in the thousands of deaths of innocent civilians occurring each week now in Gaza. Israel's turn towards extremism. The American people need to understand that Israeli politics has become dominated by extremists who mix religious fervor with murderous violence against the Palestinians. This ultra-violent side of Israel is readily apparent in Israel, but is still largely unknown to the American public. Israeli brutality in Gaza comes as a surprise to many Americans, yet it has become par for the course in Israel itself, although some Israelis are no doubt in denial of the facts on the ground in the occupied territories. The Gray Zone has put together a shocking compilation of Israeli soldiers and leading personalities celebrating Palestinian deaths. Israel's genocidal violence towards the Palestinian people appeals to much of the Israeli public for several reasons. First, always lurking in the shadows in Israel is the memory of the Holocaust. Politicians such as Netanyahu, who have long stoked the terror of the Holocaust, argue credibly and falsely that all Palestinians want to kill all the Jews, so that the violent suppression of the Palestinians is a matter of life and death for Israel. Of course, as in any spiral of hatred, there is a self-fulfilling prophecy to Netanyahu's by rhetoric and actions, leading to counteractions and hatreds from the other side. Yet rather than trying to solve those through dialogue, interaction, diplomacy, and peacemaking, the cycle of hatred is stoked. Second, Orthodox rabbis have expanded upon the security narrative by insisting that Israel has a sacred right to Palestine because God gave all the land from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean to the Israelites. Third, with 700,000 Israeli settlers living in the Palestinian lands conquered in 1967, Greater Israel has become a fait accompli for a large part of the Israeli people with a large voice in Israeli politics. These settlers moved into conquered territory and now fervently insist on defending their settlements. The UN Security Council, in the UNSC Resolution 2334, has unequivocally declared Israel's settlements in occupied Palestine to be in flagrant violation of international law. Yeah, I knew that when it was happening, when it first started happening. It was a flagrant violation of international law, and it has been since the 60s a flagrant violation of international law. Yet Smotrich himself in the inner cabinet is a leader of the settler movement. The emergence of this violent strand of Judaism dates to the early 1970s, just after the 1967 Six-Day War. The policy question in Israel after 1967 was what to do with the newly occupied Palestinian land. Drawing on the proposals of Yigal Allon, a leading Israeli politician, and by the way, the model for the part that was played by Paul Newman, in Exodus, the famous movie, Exodus, Israeli leaders decided to keep East Jerusalem and to establish settlements in the occupied West Bank and Gaza to put, quote, facts on the ground, unquote, to protect Israel's security. From the start, Israeli governments defied UN Security Council Resolution 242 in 1967, which rejected Israel's acquisition of territory by war. What happened next was momentous. Ultra-religious Jews took up the cause of Israeli settlements in the occupied territories as part of a messianic calling to make Israel the, quote, earthly support of the Lord's throne, unquote. Here, page 69, and he links to citation. In 1974, Gush Emunim was launched as an ultra-nationalist religious settler movement by followers of the father-son rabbis Abraham Isaac Kook and Tzvi Yehuda Kook. I think that's a story that you can't believe, right? Whose teachings, that's not an insult, that's their names. Abraham Isaac Kook and Tzvi Yehuda Kook, whose teachings combine the land claims of the book of Joshua, Talmudic law, Hasidic mysticism, nationalism, and political activism. The religious motivation of Greater Israel is that God gave the Jews all the land from the Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea. In the book of Joshua, probably completed in the 6th century BC, God instructs the Israelites arriving from Egypt after 40 years in the desert to annihilate the nations of kingdom in order to take the land for themselves. God promises the land extending from the Negev wilderness in the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west, including all the land of the Hittites, Joshua 1:4, New Living Translation. With God's backing, Joshua's armies commit a series of genocides to capture the land. This extraordinary violent text and related parts of the Bible, such as the annihilation of the Amalekites in the book of Samuel, have become crucial points of reference for right-wing Israelis, both religious and secular. As a result, today's Israel pursues a 6th century BC messianic vision of securing all of Palestine for the Jews. Supporters of Greater Israel often labeled the opponents of this ideology as anti-Semites, but this is wildly off the mark, as the former executive director of the Harvard Hillel has eloquently argued. The opponents of Greater Israel are against extremism and justice, not against Judaism. The Jewish settler movement led to the murderous disdain of the Palestinian. In his book, Jewish Fundamentalism in Israel, Professor Israel Shahak draws attention to the religious basilatry of Rabbi Eliezer Waldman, a leader of the West Bank settlers. Quote, let us say clearly and strongly, we are not occupying foreign territories in Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. This is our ancient home, and thank God that we have brought it back to life. Our responsibility to Jewish faith and redemption commands us to speak up in a strong and clear voice. The divine process of uniting our people and our land must not be clouded and weakened by seemingly logical concepts of, quote, security and diplomacy, unquote. I'm being joined by someone, must be by D.
Hello.
I am going through an article by Jeffrey Sachs on how Israel can be saved by ending the war in Gaza. And Sachs
Okay.
goes pretty deeply into the history of all sorts of things, uh, okay, including uh, history is stated, okay, in the Bible, in making his case. And we're in the middle of that, okay, right now. So I will
Okay.
continue what I was doing, and these are things that you know. Okay, so continuing with the reading, the divine process of uniting our people in our land must not be clouded by seemingly logical concepts of quote security unquote and quote diplomacy unquote. They only distort the truth and weaken the justice of our cause, which is engraved in our exclusive national rights to our land. We are a people of faith. This is the essence of our eternal identity and the secret of our continued existence under all conditions, unquote. This quote is from a piece written in 2002 by, uh, let's see, what was his name? Okay, it was written in 2002, okay, by Rabbi Eliezer Waldman, a leader of the West Bank settlers. I think that's what. Okay. Uh, oh no, I'm sorry. This is another quote. No, that's right. It was a quote from Waldman. Going on in Jewish history, Jewish religion, second edition, 2008. Rabbi Shahak quotes. Is he a rabbi? I don't know. It might be Isaac Shahak. I think I glossed over his name above. Okay, let me see if I can get to that again. I'm finding it hard to find that, but I guess I just want to go on with the quotation. In Jewish history, Jewish religion, second edition, 2008, Shahak quotes the chief chaplain of the Central Regional Command of the Israeli Army in 1973, a rabbi, the chief chaplain. Quote, in war, when our forces storm the enemy, they are allowed and even enjoined by the halakha, Jewish law, to kill even good civilians, that is, good Palestinian civilians, that is, civilians who are ostensibly good, unquote. The tactic of using violence to provoke mass Palestinian flight has been part of Israel's playbook from its inception. On the eve of Israel's independence, during 1947 to 1948, Jewish militant groups used terror to provoke the mass departure of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in a sordid process called uh, 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 of the Nakba by the Palestinians, quote, catastrophe in Arabic. Netanyahu's government aims to repeat the Nakba and the Gaza war by forcing Gazans to flee to neighboring Egypt or other parts of uh, the Middle East. Okay. However, unlike in 1947-48, the world is watching in real time and is expressing outrage at Israel's blatant attempt at ethnic cleansing. Egypt told Israel and the U.S. in no uncertain terms that it would not be a party to Israel's ethnic cleansing and it would not accept a flood, okay, of Gazan refugees. The quest for greater Israel is doomed to fail. Israel's attempt to violently create a greater Israel, quote unquote, will fail. The Israeli Defense Forces are suffering massive losses in the brutal urban warfare in Gaza, while Israel has killed more than 20,000 Gazans, mostly women and children. It has not destroyed Hamas's capacity to resist Israel's invasion. IDF leaders say the battle against Hamas will require many more months, but well before then, global opposition will likely become insurmountable. In desperation, Israeli leaders such as Defense Minister Benny Gantz want to expand the war to Lebanon and probably to Iran. U.S. hardliners such as Republican U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina have dutifully and predictably chimed in, urging a U.S. war with Iran. Israelis' gambit too will likely fail. Okay, the U.S. is in no position to fight a wider Middle East war after having drawn down its stockpile of ammunition in Ukraine and Gaza. The American people are too strongly opposed another U.S. war, and their opposition will be heard, okay, in an election year, even by a Congress in the pocket of the military-industrial complex. Israel's diplomatic setbacks, unless reversed, will prove devastating. Israel has hemorrhaged political support worldwide. In a recent UN General Assembly vote, 174 countries with 94% of the world population voted in favor of Palestinian political self-determination, while just 4 countries with 4% of the world population, Israel, the United States, also Micronesia, and Nauru, voted against. Another 15 countries abstained or did not vote. Israel's hardline militarism has united the world against it. Israel counts entirely now on its one remaining supporter, the United States, but U.S. support is also waning by a huge margin. 59% for and 19% oppose American support the ceasefire. Also, American support Israel's security, but not its extremism. Of course, America has its own Christian and Jewish zealots who base their politics on biblical base their politics on biblical orthodoxy, okay, and literalism, but they are a minority of public opinion. American support for Israel depends on the two-state solution. Biden knows it and has reiterated U.S. support for the two-state solution, even as the U.S. Supplies ammunition for Israel's war on Gaza. While American Jews generally support Israel, they do not support Israel's religious messianism. In a 2020 Pew survey, I guess it's Pew survey, only 30% of American Jews believed that, quote, God gave the land that is now Israel to the Jewish people, unquote. 63% believed in the feasibility of peace between Israel and Palestine through the two-state solution. Only 33%, as of 2020, believed that the Israeli government was making sincere efforts towards peace with the Palestinians. Even Orthodox U.S. Jews are divided on the question of Greater Israel. Some Orthodox communities, such as the Chabad, are leaders in the biblically motivated Greater Israel, while others, such as the Satmar community, also known as the Neturai Karta, are anti-Zionists and outspoken critics of Israel's war on the Palestinian people, stating that Judaism is a religion, not a nation concept. The Satmar community believes that the revival of the Jewish homeland must follow God's timeline and not a Zionist timeline. Supporting Israel's extremism is not in America's interest. The U.S. has been providing the munitions for Israel's brutal war. This complicity has led to a lawsuit by Palestinian plaintiffs charging the U.S. government with violations of the Genocide Convention. As part of this legal effort, the U.S.-based Center for Constitutional Rights has methodically documented the genocidal statements by Israeli leaders here and here, and Jeff links to that. The U.S. is also facing severe and costly diplomatic isolation as it defends Israel's indefensible actions. In recent votes of the Security Council and the UN General Assembly, the United States has stood almost alone in backing Israel's hyper-violent and unjust actions. This is hurting the United States and countless other areas of foreign policy and global economics. The U.S. federal budget is also under tremendous stress for military related spending, which will reach around 1.5 trillion in total in 2024. The American people have had enough of the bulging military spending, which has been a central factor in raising the public debt from around 35% of GDP in 2000 to around 100% of GDP today. With soaring debts and the rise in interest rates on mortgages and consumer loans, the public is resisting Biden's calls for more deficit spending to fund the wars in Ukraine and Gaza, and will vociferously oppose a wider war in the Middle East, especially one that would draw the U.S. into direct combat. Of course, U.S. open-ended support for Israel seemed to be unstoppable in American politics. The Israel lobby, a powerful constellation of Israel politicians and wealthy Americans, has played a huge role in building this strong support. The Israel lobby gave $30 million in campaign contributions to the 2022 congressional election cycle and will give vastly more in 2024. That figure, the 30 million in campaign contributions, that is too little for 2022. In previous uh, 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 in previous streams, okay, on Dump the Corruption, we have documented at least uh, $50 million in campaign contributions, including the primaries, okay, and the general elections uh, uh, by organizations that were constituted themselves as part, okay, of uh, uh, the Israel lobby. And the effects were devastating in the 2022 congressional elections, defeating many progressives who were sure winners, except for the contributions, okay, of the Israel lobby, and will give vastly more in 2024. Yet, AIPAC alone has threatened to give $100 million. Yet, the lobby is up against the public's growing opposition to Israel's brutality in Gaza. Two-state solution remains Israel's true chance for peace and security. Israeli leaders and diplomats have to stop shouting the critics are all anti-Semites and listen to what the world is actually saying. Israel and Palestine need to live side by side based on international law and mutual security. The support for a two-state solution is support for the peace and security of the Jewish people in the state of Israel, just as it is support for the peace and security of the Palestinian people in their own state. To the contrary, supporting Israel's genocide in Gaza and inflaming anti-Israel and anti-U.S. sentiment around the world is antithetical to Israel's long-term security and perhaps even its survival. The Arab and Islamic states have repeatedly declared their readiness to normalize relations with Israel in the context of the two-state solution. This goes back to the 2002 Arab Peace Initiative and includes the important final statement of the extraordinary Joint Arab-Islamic Summit in Riyadh on November 11, 2023. The U.S. and Arab countries should quickly agree on establishing a joint peacekeeping force to keep both sides safe in the context of implementing the two-state solution. Many zealous religious settlers will strongly resist the Palestinian state, asserting their right to do so based on ancient biblical texts. Yet the point of Judaism is not to rule over millions of Palestinians or to ethnically cleanse them. The real point is not to provoke global opprobrium, but to use reason and goodwill to find peace. As Hillel the Elder declared, quote, whatever is hasteful and distasteful to you, do not do to your fellow man. This is the entire Torah. The rest is commentary. Go learn, unquote. The real point is to fulfill the ethical vision of the prophet, Isaiah, who prophesied that, quote, nations shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against but nation, neither shall they learn war anymore, unquote. So may it be, says Jeffrey Sachs. This is the most magnificent article on the Israel-Palestine conflict that I've seen so far from Jeffrey Sachs, and probably the most okay, uh, the most magnificent article I've ever seen him write. It's a very comprehensive treatment of the background for this conflict, of the facts, of this conflict, of uh, the religious justifications for what is being pursued now, of the criminality, of the Israeli regime, right now. It covers every base. It really does. It's a very long article. I had not meant to spend so much time on this article, but this is a great piece, and
It's
everybody should
important.
read it, for themselves. Dee, any comments?
It's important. I thought it was a very good article too, because you have to go into the history. A lot of people don't know the history, and it's something that has to keep being repeated over and over and over again, because for some reason it doesn't really stick to some people. They can read it, but it just, for some reason, they don't process it. They've been brought up in a way to think, okay, 1948 just happened, and it just, you know, the state happened. They leave out history. They leave out, when you have the Christian Zionists, you have Jewish Zionists, there's just groups in play. There's a lot more to it than just saying in May of 1948, boom, there was Israel. So there's a lot of explaining.
Yes, there's a lot more to it, than that. And Jeff went over it.
Yes, and that's important to go over it. He brought up the Greater Israel, which is extremely important.
Yes, and he brought up the Greater Israel, in an accurate way, pointing out that it stretches all the way from the Mediterranean Sea, to the Euphrates River. And that was very important to emphasize that.
Hmm.
I see a statement at the beginning from Steve Day saying, why save the apartheid state? I don't think Jeff Sachs is advocating for saving the apartheid state. Uh, the two-state solution that he's advocating for would involve, a secular Israel. It would still be two-state solution, because that's the solution being supported right now, by international law, and that's the solution being supported by the Arab states. But I'm certain that the Israeli part of the two-state solution would no longer be allowed, to be, an apartheid state. I'm sure that he is no way advocating for that, nor,
No.
but nor would he tolerate it. And his article speaks against the apartheid state and the ethnic cleansing that it has led to, and the oppression of the Palestinians. So,
Right. Now, the people, now Smotrich was saying, him with that whole thing with wanting to export, I'll put it that way, the Palestinians out of Gaza. And the U.S. is against that. But what I was thinking, something, he's the type that need to be, if you're going to talk about exporting anybody, it has to be this whole far right mentality has to go somewhere. Because as long as you have Bezalel Smotrich and all his group and nobody doing anything about them, that's the problem when it comes to peace in the region. And they've got to get rid of that extreme Zionism.
Yes, they
You can't
do.
have that extreme Zionism and say you want peace. It's just not compatible. Those are the people that need to leave, or something has to be done about them, because you can't have them around and trying to have peace. And the safety of the Palestinian people. It's crucial. Protecting the Palestinian people is extremely important because we see what those zealots do. We know what they're capable of.
They would have to be repatriated to Israel if Israel would have them. But I think the wisest thing for Israel to do is to send them back from where they came, because they do not belong, okay, in a democratic Israel.
No.
In the case of Smotrich, he's a fascist. He said that himself, that he was a fascist. Okay, and also Ben Gvir looks to me like a fascist, okay, as well. I think one thing Israel has to do is to purge itself, okay, of fascists.
Yes.
They have no place, okay, in a democratic society.
Exactly. They don't want a democratic society.
Right. So if Israel is to go forward as a democratic society, it has to get rid of the fascists that they've allowed to come into Israel and to freely operate inside of it. Okay, so that's my view.
Oh, I agree with you, because you can't have an agreement with two states when you have zealots that are out to consistently terrorize a population.
To consistently terrorize the population of the other state,
Exactly. So you can't have that.
yes, and you can't have Israel run by terrorists.
No, you can't. And also amongst Jewish people themselves, when they talk about the particular Jew that's welcome in Israel and the Jew that they have a problem with, you can't have that. You just can't.
Yes, I agree with you. So I'm going to move on from Israel to the broader situation that has developed in 2023. So, right now, let me say here, this is going to be a long show. Okay, very dense.
Okay.
So, I'm going to move on to the second piece I want to talk about.
Okay.
That piece is from Common Dreams, and it is called 2023, the year the bubble of U.S. leadership burst. And the tagline is, if Ukraine exemplifies yet another iconic U.S. military failure, and BRICS, the changing of the guard in the economic realm, the sadistic savagery in Gaza repudiates the moral right of the United States to lead anything. This one is by Robert by Freeman for Common Dreams. It was published on December 29th, 2023. Year ends invite retrospectives, and every year is by definition, quote, unprecedented, unquote. After all, it has never occurred before, but, quote, unprecedented is, uh, quote unquote, is a cliche that drains the very word of its intended impact. The year 2023 is not so much, quote, unprecedented, unquote, as it is, quote, epochal, unquote, a quote, turning point, unquote, or as in the terminology I choose, quote, the year the bubble burst, unquote. That implies rapidity, for bursting happens quickly, and irreversibility, for burst bubbles do not reassemble themselves. This bursting is especially true on the foreign front, where the U.S. has been the global leader since the end of the Cold War if not since the end of World War II. The bubble of U.S. leadership in the world burst in 2023 because of the combined impact of three events: Ukraine, BRICS, and Gaza. Ukraine is lost. In a war of attrition, the advantage goes to the side with the greater population. Russia's population is 6 times by Ukraine's. No, that is not factually correct. It was, at the start of the war, perhaps 3 times that, of Ukraine. Now, so many people have left there, though, that is probably 7 to 8 times, Ukraine. Uh, Anyway, he goes on and says, and a defense has an inherent 3-to-1 advantage over an offense. Russia, having captured 20% of Ukraine, is now on the defense. Ukraine doesn't have the manpower, the artillery, the ammunition, the air power, the air defenses, the time, the money, the strategy, or the allies to repel what U.S. News and World Report say is the strongest military in the world. Notice that statement. U.S. News and World Report, a conservative U.S. outlet, is calling Russia, quote, the strongest military, in the world. Absent the United States getting directly involved, which is just not going to happen in a presidential election year, there is no plausible scenario in which Ukraine wins. Insiders know this. The public will have to wait until after the 2024 election to get the memo. Either way, the damage done and the loss is incalculable. The U.S. menaced Russia for decades by relentlessly moving NATO up to Russia's borders. Then the U.S. helped overthrow the democratically elected but Russian-leaning government in Kiev and installed its own oligarchic, crypto-fascist, Western-leaning government. That was the 2014 Maidan coup, referred to by one U.S. intelligence asset as, quote, the most blatant coup in history, unquote. I have to comment on that. And I have to say that for all that we have spent on defense over this period, on so-called defense, over this period of time, all of the huge defense budgets, we did not seriously build, and for all the wars we fought all over the world, all the military actions that we never said were wars, but were small wars, we never actually oriented the military buildup that we undertook through this time to enable us to fight the ground wars in Europe and in Asia. We created a military that was designed to fight wars at sea, and in the air, and that was also designed to help ground forces, in other nations. We purposely avoided preparing for ground wars because those in Korea, and Vietnam had been so costly. So we did not have the will to prepare for ground wars. Yet we still moved NATO up to Russia's borders. We still threatened them. We still put their backs up to the wall until finally they said, no more. We are going to stop this. We're not going to have NATO missiles on our doorstep, in Kiev. And so they invaded at that point. After we provoked them for 20 years in a way that has turned out to be totally irresponsible. Why do I say that? Because we provoked them without the military capability to make it stick. And the war has proved that. It has proved that our military and civilian elites who ran this foreign policy for 30 years, for more than 30 years now, did not know what they were doing because they didn't prepare for a ground war, in Europe. Now, I'm not saying they should have prepared for a ground war in Europe. I'm not for that. I was never for that. What I am saying is if you're going to run an aggressive foreign policy against a major military power such as Russia and a nuclear power to boot, you need to have the military power to make it stick. You need to be responsible enough to craft a military that has that kind of capability. These leaders who have done it throughout this period, Clinton, uh, George Bush, 43, Obama, Trump, and Biden, none of them prepared for a land war, in Europe. And the war in Ukraine, exposed the military shortcomings of the U.S. in preparation, in spite of all that money that was spent supposedly to prepare. It was not well spent. It was spent in the wrong direction with the wrong kind, of emphasis. It was a failure of policy, a monumental failure of policy, because the people involved in pursuing the policy were not thinking straight. What our military was ready to do was to defend us here at home, perhaps defend, in the Western Hemisphere. It was not prepared to back, aggressive foreign policies in Europe, in the Middle East, in Asia. It was not prepared to make the hegemony of the United States, which was the essence of our foreign policy, stick. That's the fact that we have to come up against now and that we have to embrace. That since the early 1990s, our leaders have been fooling around with respect to foreign policy. They have not really planned seriously. They have not really foreseen the way the world, was going to develop, in spite of our role in pursuing the development of the world. Who was behind the very rapid growth, of China? Of course, that had a lot to do with the people of China itself. But who was giving China all that business? We were, because we wanted to enrich the capitalist elites here in the United States. So the economic policy we were pursuing in the foreign realm was inconsistent with our desire to maintain a hegemonic system. The last thing we should have done was to have built up the Chinese. That was the last thing we should have done. But we joyfully did that for these past 30 years. And from my point of view, that was a good thing to do. It was a good thing to do to develop China, to support it in that way. but only if we had a foreign policy that was trying to produce a multipolar world. But that was not our foreign policy. Our foreign policy was a mistake, and it was incoherent, and it was inconsistent, and it has been a failure. And that's what we see here. The mission was to dismember Russia and put its vast natural wealth in the hands of U.S. corporations. The failure of that mission, going on with the article, cannot be disguised or minimized. It is especially embarrassing after the very public U.S. defeats in Iraq and Afghanistan. And it is all the more damning because Ukraine sacrificed 500,000 of its men to carry out the U.S. mission. Yet the U.S. couldn't even keep it supplied with ammunition. Beyond the direct damage, the collateral damage of the loss is staggering. The never deserved reputation of the U.S. for military prowess is devastated. NATO is weakened. The Nord Stream pipeline destruction revealed the U.S. to be the world's greatest perpetrator of international terrorism. The loss of the pipeline has left Europe with energy costs 2.5 times what they were before the war, gravely damaging its international competitiveness. The mythic repute of U.S. weapons before this, only deployed against much lesser foes, is shattered. And instead of being dismembered, Russia has come out of the war stronger than ever. In addition to now possessing the world's strongest military, Russia's economy shook off, quote, the greatest sanctions regime in the history of the world, unquote, and is outstripping those of the United States and Europe. And by the way, it's not doing it with the communist system it has before. It has pivoted east and deepened its strategic ties with China, the world's leading commercial power and the U.S.'s leading adversary. And it has gained enormous stature in the global south for having stood up to and defeated the world's most inveterate bully. Ukraine is an epochal failure for the U.S. in all dimensions, the worse for having been entirely self-inflicted. Then Ukraine accelerated the growth of the BRICS consortium. This group, originally made up of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, hence the acronym, aims to bypass the U.S.-dominated global trading system, instead building one that allows nations of the global south to not simply be milked of their wealth by the West, but to prosper in their own right. In August, it named 6 new nations for membership: Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, and Saudi Arabia. These now, 11 nations. We have to, of course, say that they're not 11 nations because Argentina had a result, in its election that basically a puppet of the United States won the election, in Argentina. And that puppet, who has adopted the US dollar as the currency of Argentina, has also decided not to join BRICS. So we don't have 11 BRICS nations. We have only 10 BRICS nations. So instead of contributing a combined 37% of global GDP versus 30% for the Western G7 bloc, I would say that statistic is more like 35% of global GDP versus 30% for the Western G7 bloc. But there we go. They are explicitly committed to dethroning the dollar as the world's international reserve currency by, among other things, trading with each other in non-dollar currencies. Russia and China, for example, no longer use dollars in trade between themselves. Of key significance is the composition of the new members. Half of them are major oil exporters. Also among them, importantly, Saudi Arabia, a formerly staunch ally of the United States. With Russia, they produce 44% of the world's oil. Why is this important? The dollar status as international reserve currency is closely tied to oil. Until recently, oil was only sold in dollars, meaning that all the world's nations had to acquire dollars to be able to buy oil. So when BRICS plus oil exporters began accepting payment for their oil in non dollar currencies, it is the dollar that will be damaged. Nations will no longer need dollars to buy oil. That means they will not need to buy dollars by purchasing the U.S. Treasury securities. That will make it almost impossible for the U.S. to fund its massive budget and trade deficits, which are financed, that's right, by selling treasuries to other nations. Now, that is not true. The author of this article doesn't understand the approach to economics known, as MMT, modern monetary theory. We still will be able to fund a massive budget, and our trade deficits, because our ability to fund that is based on our status, as a monetary sovereign. It is not based on our status as having, the reserve currency, of the world. We still will be able to fund, a massive budget, and trade deficits. Now, we may not be able to get the kinds of goods that we have from certain nations. We may have to turn, to other nations. The decline of the dollar in international trade is going to make things more expensive for us. It will be hard to buy certain things. We may have to reshore. I'm sure we're going to have to reshore some of the manufacturing capability we gave up. But in my view, that is a good thing for our country, not a bad thing for our country. It's going to make us far stronger. Anyway, going on with the article, that day is fast approaching. As seen in Saudi Arabia announcing this year it will begin accepting payment for oil in Chinese yuan. The growth of BRICS, its economic clout, its explicit de-dollarization agenda, and the centrality of oil exporting nations and its members will prove like the water shifting in the bottom of a rowboat. It will decisively reverse the primacy of the U.S. and West in global economic affairs. That, by the way, is true. The damage isn't all landed yet and won't be for many years, but the new direction is clear and irreversible. There is a new economic sheriff in town. Yeah, indeed, that's true. Most important in bursting the bubble of U.S. leadership in international affairs is his tragic, morally suicidal complicity in Israel's genocide in Gaza. The Biden administration has gone to extraordinary lengths to enable Israel to murder tens of thousands of innocent, defenseless Palestinian civilians, most of them women and children. It has provided and dramatically increased economic subsidies. It has shipped tens of thousands of tons of weapons and ammunition to Israel, even bypassing Congress to do so. It has provided military cover in the form of 2 aircraft carrier battle groups to prevent other nations from intervening to stop the slaughter. It has exercised its veto power at the UN Security Council to prevent a ceasefire, even for humanitarian reasons. The United States is all in on the massacre of tens of thousands of defenseless Palestinian civilians. As a result of the U.S. help, Israel is able to bomb with impunity working hospitals, refugee camps, schools, churches, mosques, relief agencies, anything where civilians shelter to try to escape the apocalyptic destruction. And it is doing this, knowing that civilians are the main casualties, thus making it not just, quote, killing, unquote, innocent, defenseless women and children, but murdering them. And this is still just the beginning of the depraved degeneracy. The World Food Program says that as many as 750,000 civilians are now being intentionally starved. This by supposedly civilized nations, and with no hospitals, no medicines, no water, and no sewerage. It is only a matter of time before epidemic diseases emerge and spread and kill hundreds of thousands. It is undisguised mass murder for the undeniable purpose of ethnic cleansing, which has always been Israel's agenda since even before it was founded. It is genocide, pure and simple, and all in public view of the world's 8 billion people. In Gaza, the U.S. returns to its roots, albeit vicariously. It too was founded in genocide. In the case of the 50 plus million Native Americans who once populated the North American continent, it too used vastly disproportionate force, the mechanized tools of an industrial age civilization, systematically exterminating a Stone Age one. It too boasted its commitment to ethnic cleansing with its self flattering myths of racial superiority and its carefully cultivated conceits of cultural supremacy. Difference is that then all the world was not watching the daily depravity. In fact, there was a lot of depravity going on in other places in the world as well during that time. And it had not formed its present day revulsion and international prohibitions against such state sponsored barbarism. Now it is, and has. The damage to the U.S. reputation is palpable, undeniable, stunning, okay, and irreversible. I'm not a Bible thumper in any way, says the author, but I was raised in a Christian household and remember some of my verses. One of the most wise, in no way connected to theology, is from Mark. Quote, no man can be defiled by anything that comes to him from without. A man can only be defiled by that which comes out of himself from within. Unquote. Isn't it so? The U.S. has defiled itself, humiliated itself, as no other nation could possibly do. It has destroyed goodwill that has taken centuries to acquire and that will never be recovered. If Ukraine exemplifies yet another iconic U.S. military failure, in BRICS, the changing of the guard in the economic realm, the sadistic savagery in Gaza repudiates the moral right of the U.S. to lead anything. No nation will ever again be intimidated by its hypocritical tut-tutting about human rights or its sanctimonious finger wagging about the responsibility to protect. It is more than anything else the world's leading purveyor of death, and all the nations of the world can see it. The combination of these three events signal the 2023 bursting of the bubble of U.S. global leadership. The year will be remembered as the pivot point, the turning away from the post-Cold War unipolar era and the ushering in of the post-unipolar, post-Western, centric multipolar world. 500 years of Western domination of the world order are ending. There will be no going back. In my view, that's a brilliant article on how the world order is now turning and on three major factors that are accelerating this kind, okay, of turning. This article sees them clearly and it outlines clearly what is happening. And I think that it tells the truth, okay, the unvarnished truth. So, D, commentary.
I think you pretty much covered everything.
Okay, there's nothing you want to add to it.
No.
Okay, so then I will go on. Kay is back to losing her net again. I'm sorry that okay, is happening to her.
Yeah, that's awful.
I wanted to go to a brilliant third article here before, okay, I end. Uh, this is an article that, okay, when I put this article in my description to schedule this stream for Facebook, Facebook would not actually take, okay, the stream. I scheduled it through StreamYard, okay, but when I specified the following article as part of the description, Facebook would not allow me to schedule the stream. So I took the link for this article. I took that link out of the description. Okay, I left it in for the Twitter versions of the stream and for the YouTube versions of the stream, but not for the Facebook version, okay, of the stream. So I don't know how Facebook is going to react to my talking about, okay, this article. I may have a strike coming from Facebook. Okay, I don't know. But, okay, I'm going to take a chance on talking about the article anyway, because it's a very, very important article. It's by one of my favorite commentators, specifically Pepe Escobar. But it's from a publication called Strategic Culture, from the Strategic Culture Foundation, okay, which is a Russian foundation, okay, I believe. And I think that's when I included a link to the publications of this strategic culture place, I think that's what stopped the scheduling on Facebook. At first. Anyway, the title of this article is Russia, China, okay, are on a roll. It's by Pepe Escobar. He published it on December 26, 2023. 2023 may be defined for posterity as the year of the Russia-China strategic partnership. This wonder of wonders could easily sway under a groove by who else? Stevie Wonder. Quote, "Here I am, baby. Signed, sealed, delivered. I'm yours." Unquote. In the first 11 months of 2023, trade between Russia and China exceeded 200 billion. They did not expect to achieve that until 2024. Clearly, 2024 is going to be much greater. I wouldn't be surprised to find that it's suddenly 400 billion or 500 billion. Now, surely, that's commentary of my own. That didn't come from Pepe. He didn't add that sort of prediction. Now, surely, that's one partnership under a groove. Once again, signed, sealed, okay, and also delivered during the visit of a large delegation to Beijing last week, led by Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin, who met with Chinese President Xi Jinping and revisited and upgraded the whole spectrum of the comprehensive partnership slash strategic cooperation, complete with an array of new major joint projects, that is, of Russia and China. I'm expanding the scope of this article so you can see it better. Simultaneously, I should say I'm expanding the font. Simultaneously, on the Great Game 2.0 front, Everything that needed to be affirmed was touched by Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov's detailed interview to Dmitry Simes on his great game show. That is on Simes's great game show. Add to it the carefully structured breakdown written by head of the SVR, Sergei Narishkin, defining 2024 as, quote, the year of geopolitical awakening, unquote, and coming up with arguably the key formulation following the upcoming cosmic NATO humiliation in the steppes, okay, of Donbass. Quote, in 2024, the Arab world will remain the main space in the struggle for the establishment of a new order, unquote. Confronted with such detailed geopolitical fine tuning, it's no wonder the imperial reaction was apoplexy, revealed epidermically in long, tortuous analyses, quote unquote, trying to explain why President Putin turned out to be, quote, the, quote, geopolitical victor, unquote, of 2023, seducing vast swaths of the Arab world and the global south, solidifying BRICS side by side with China, and propelling the EU further into a black
Hi,
void of
little.
its own.
Hi.
Huh?
Excuse me. No, excuse me. No, I forgot this. I wasn't muted, and Colby was crying, so I was talking to Colby.
Oh, so you were trying to make comments?
No. No, actually, Colby was crying, so I was talking to Colby.
Oh,
I
okay.
have to mute myself.
Okay, fine. Seducing vast swaths of the Arab world and the global south, solidifying BRICS side by side with China, and propelling the EU further into a black void of its own, and the hegemons making. Yes, because the hegemon, of course, destroyed the Nord Stream pipeline. Putin even allowed himself, half in jest, to offer Russia support for the potential, quote, re-annexation, unquote, of country 404 border regions once annexed by Stalin, eventually to be returned to former owners, Poland, Hungary, and Romania. He added that he is 100% certain this is what residents of those still Ukrainian borders want. Were that to happen, we would have Transcarpathia back to Hungary. But by the way, one side of my family comes from Transcarpathia. Transcarpathia back to Hungary. Also Galicia and Volyn back to Poland. Okay, and also, another part of my family, the other half of my family, uh, 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 comes from not what is now in Poland, but not in the territories that would be transferred back to Poland. Okay, and Bukovina back to Romania. Can you feel the house already rocking to the break of dawn in Budapest, Warsaw, and Bucharest? In other words, he's saying these countries would be very, very happy to have those territories back. And rather than Putin talking about conquering Poland or Hungary, okay, or Romania, he's not talking about that. He's not talking about making them satellites of Russia. He's talking about giving them back parts of Ukraine. And he thinks they're going to celebrate that, rocking until the break of dawn. Then there's the possibility of the hegemon ordering NATO's junior punks to harass Russian oil tankers in the Baltic Sea and, quote, isolate, unquote, St. Petersburg. It goes without saying that the Russian response would be to just take out command and control centers. Hacking might be enough. burn electronics across the spectrum, and blockade the Baltic at the entrance by running a quote freedom of navigation exercise so everyone becomes familiar with the new groove. That China Russia Far East symbiosis, one of the most impressive features of the expanded Russia China partnership, is what is being planned for the Chinese northeastern province, of Heilongjiang. Heilongjiang. Yes, I'm not sure of the pronunciation of that one. The idea is to turn into an economic, scientific development and national defense mega hub centered on the provincial capital, Harbin, China. That's up north for those of you who don't know. Complete with a new sprawling special economic zone, SEZ. The key vector is that this mega hub would also coordinate the development of the immense Russian Far East. This was discussed in detail at the Eastern Economic Forum in Vladivostok last September. In a unique, startling arrangement, the Chinese may be allowed to manage selected latitudes of the Russian Far East for the next 100 years. Boy, that's really wild. I don't know if that's going to happen. That's really wild. As Hong Kong-based analyst Thomas Poland detailed, Beijing is budgeting no less than 10 trillion yuan, $1.4 trillion for the whole thing. Now that is an enormous investment. Half of it would be absorbed by Harbin, that one capital city. The blueprint will reach the National People's Congress next March and is expected to be approved. It has already been approved by the lower house of the Duma in Moscow. The ramifications are mind-boggling. We would have Harbin elevated to the status of a direct administered city, just like Beijing, Shanghai, Tianjin, and Chongqing. And most of all, a Sino-Russian management committee will be established in Harbin to oversee the whole project. Top flight Chinese universities, including Beijing University, would transfer their main campuses to Harbin. The universities of national defense and national technology would merge with Harbin Engineering University to form a new entity focused on defense industries. High-tech research institutes and company in Beijing, Shanghai, and Shenzhen would also move to Harbin. The People's Bank of China would establish its headquarters for northern China in Harbin, complete with markets trading stocks and commodities futures. The residents of Heilongjiang would be allowed to travel back and forth to designated Russian Far East regions without a visa. The new Heilongjiang SEZ would have its own customs area and no import taxes. That's the same spirit driving driving Belt and Road Initiative, connectivity corridors, and the International North-South Transportation Corridor, the INSDC. The underlying rationale is wider Eurasia integration. At the recent Astana Club meeting in Kazakhstan, researcher Damjan Miskovic, director of policy research at the ADA University in Baku, gave an excellent presentation on connectivity corridors. He referred, for instance, to the C5+1, 5 Central Asian stands plus China, meeting 3 months ago in Dushanbe, joined by Azerbaijan's President Aliyev, that translates as Central Asian Caucasus integration. So Miskovic is paying due attention to everything that is evolving in what he defines correctly as, quote, the Silk Road region, unquote, interlinking the Euro-Atlantic with Asia-Pacific and interconnecting West Asia, South Asia, and wider Eurasia. Strategically, of course, that's the, quote, geopolitical hinge where NATO meets the Shanghai Cooperation Organization and where the Belt and Road Initiative connects with um, uh, Turkey and the territory of the EU, unquote. In practical terms, Russia, China know exactly what needs to be done to propel economic connectivity and synergistic relationships, quote unquote, all across this vast spectrum. The war of economic corridors heats up. The fragmentation of the global economy is already polarizing the expanding BRICS 10, starting on January 1st under the Russian presidency, and without flirting with dollarization Argentina and the shrinking G7. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Andrei Rudenko, a key Asia hand talking to TASS, once reaffirmed that the key drive for the Greater Eurasia Partnership official Russian policy is to connect the Eurasia Economic Union, the EAEU, with BRI. As Russia develops a carefully calibrated balance between China and India, the same drive applies to developing the INSTC, where Russia, Iran, uh, India are the main partners, and Azerbaijan is also bound to become a crucial player. Add to it vastly improved Russian ties with North Korea, Mongolia, Pakistan, okay, a Belt and Road Initiative and SCO member, and ASEAN, except for westernized Singapore. Um, um, the Belt and Road Initiative, when it comes down to the nitty gritty, is on a roll. I've just been to Moscow, Astana, and Almaty for 3 weeks, and it was possible to confirm with several sources that trains in all connectivity corridors are packed to the hilt. Via the Trans-Siberian, I visit Astana all the way to Minsk, and via Almaty to Uzbekistan. Russian International Affairs Council Program Manager Yulia Melnikova adds that, quote, Moscow can and should integrate more actively into transit operations along the China, Mongolia, Russia route, unquote, and accelerate the harmonization of standards between the EAEU and China, not to mention invest further in Russia-China cooperation in the Arctic. Enter President Putin at a Russian railways meeting, unveiling an ambitious, massive 10-year infrastructure expansion plan encompassing new railways and improved connectivity with Asia from Pacific to the Arctic. The Russian economy has definitely pivoted to Asia, responsible for 70% of trade turnover amid the Western sanctions dementia. So, what's on the menu ahead is everything from modernization of the Trans Siberian Railroad and establishing a major logistical hub in the Urals in Siberia to improving port infrastructure in the Azov, Black, and Caspian Seas, and faster INSTC cargo transit between uh, the cities of Murmansk, okay, and Mumbai. That's really north-south, okay. Murmansk, of course, is in the Arctic Circle. in Siberia, okay, and Mumbai, of course, is in India. Putin, once again, almost as an afterthought, recently remarked that trade through the Suez Canal cannot be considered effective anymore compared to Russia's Northern Sea route, with a single sharp geopolitical move by Yemen's Ansarallah has made it graphic for everyone to see. Russian development of the Northern Sea route happens to run in total synergy with the Chinese drive to develop the Arctic leg, okay, of BRI, but BRI is the Belt and Road Initiative. On the oil front, Russian shipments to China via its Arctic coast only takes 35 days, 10 days less than Suez. But Danila Krylov, researcher with the Department of the Middle East and Post-Soviet Asia at the Institute of Scientific Information on Social Sciences of the Russian Academy of Sciences, offers a straightforward insight. Quote, I view the fact that the Americans are getting involved in Yemen as part of a great game scenario. There is more to it than just a desire to punish the Houthis or Iran, as it is more likely driven by a desire to prevent the monopolization of the market and hinder Chinese export deliveries to Europe. The Americans need an operational Suez Canal and a corridor between India and Europe, while the Chinese don't want it because these are two direct competitors. It's not that the Chinese don't want it. With the Northern Sea Route up and running, they don't need it. Now freeze. In the ongoing war, ever more fractious war of economic corridors, the initiative is with Russia, China. In desperation, and no more than an option deprived headless chicken victim in the war of economic corridors, the hegemon's EU vassals are resorting to twisting the follow the money playbook. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs has defined the freezing of Russian assets, not only private, but also state owned by the EU, as pure theft. Now, Russian Finance Minister Anton Siluanov, sorry, had to get that pronunciation straight. Okay, Siluanov is making it very clear that Moscow will react symmetrically to the possible use of income from these frozen assets. Paraphrasing Sergei Lavrov, you confiscate, we confiscate, we all confiscate. The repercussions will be cataclysmic for the hegemon. I hasten to add, of course, the hegemon is us. We have to keep that in mind. The hegemon is us. He's talking about us. No global South nation outside of NATO stand will be encouraged to park its foreign currency reserves in the West. That may lead in a flash to the whole global South ditching the US-led international financial system and joining a Russia-China-led alternative. Excuse me a second. The peer competitor, Russia-China strategic partnership, is already directly challenging the quote rules-based international order unquote on all fronts, improving their historical spheres of influence while actively developing vast interconnected connectivity corridors, bypassing said order, quote unquote. That precludes, as much as possible, direct hot war with the hegemon, or to put it on Silk Road terms, while the dogs of war bark, lie, and steal. The Russia-China caravan strolls on. I love that. While the dogs of war bark, lie, and steal, the Russia-China caravan strolls on, or rolls on, certainly. A great piece, so insightful, so perceptive, so prophetic, so attuned to what Russia and China are doing to change the world, to change the economic structure, to change the power structure based on huge changes in economic power, bringing the center of the world again to Asia and to the vast landmark of the vast landmass of Eurasia, as Mackinder characterized it, the world island. What's happening is the coming together of the world island, led by Russia and China. But also, what's involved is organizing Africa to come into alliance with the world island. It's completely checking and completely destroying the influence network that was based on naval power and air power that was created by the United States in the post-World War II period. But that, of course, started earlier based on the empire, of the British. But those sort of patterns, are coming to the end. And the development of the world island is proceeding at breakneck speed. The failure of the United States, to break up Russia, to break up the Federation into small nations through its move, in Ukraine, and the defeat of that move, by Russia, means that the coming together of Eurasia can now be accelerated really without interruption by the United States and by its allies, in Western Europe. And if the United States does not change its foreign policy, does not actually watch out and begin to integrate its part of the world on a collaborative and friendly basis, not on a dominating basis, but on a basis where nations, are equal. We need to create a competing integration that integrates North America, and South America, at least certainly, into a region that is economically integrated and that itself, is multipolar, because the great powers of Latin America, specifically Mexico, also Brazil, and to a lesser degree Colombia, and Argentina, and maybe Venezuela, have to also be viewed from the standpoint of multipolarity as regional powers. And we need to create the integration of these regional powers on a friendly and non-exploitive basis. We need to have the governments doing the integration, in a planned way in which they hold the corporations in check and prevent the corporations from exploiting the populations of North and South America as the regions come together. We have to start, to do that here. We have to make that, a success, so that people in this region all want to come together and then act, in a friendly manner towards the integration, of the world island. Now, where areas of Europe fit in, where Western Europe fits in, uh, that group of nations that dominated the world for so long, at this point, I do not know. They, in order to participate in this and to have an important role in this, they have to solve, their energy problems. Since the cost of energy has gone up by 2.5 times as a result of the breaking of the Nord Stream pipeline, I think the Europeans have to accelerate their use of wind power and solar power and water power. They have to base their economies on that kind, of energy. They have to make the investments that are necessary to do that, and they have to approach this as if it were a Manhattan Project. Uh, they have to force the corporations to contribute to this, and they have to fund it all through use of currency, sovereignty. As individual nations, the Europeans don't have currency sovereignty now because they are part, of the Eurozone, and they've given away their currency sovereignty to the Eurozone. Now they can make a decision. They can say, so be it. Let's move on, to a united Europe and make the European Central Bank, uh, let us make them a bank that is responsible for the economic development of the Eurozone, the whole Eurozone, and is willing to use its sovereignty to allow the individual nations to deficit spend in order to bring the green revolution to Europe as rapidly as possible. There needs to be a 5-year plan to make the transition come to Europe. Then, 5 years from now, or 10 years from now, it will be possible for Europe to participate with other powers as something of an equal. But if the energy problem that has been created, by the Ukraine war is not solved by the Europeans acting collectively to support a green transition, then Europe will never be uh, one of the multipolar powers. Again, it will be relegated to a backwater, of civilization, and I think that would be regrettable, and that is to be opposed. But it's up to Europe now to act, in a constructive way to counter what has been done to them, actually by the United States. I think Europe has to get its independence back from the United States and act in its own interest to solve, the energy problem so that it can safeguard uh, the industrial might it has had, which is being destroyed before our eyes by the shortage, of energy that we see, in Europe. So I'm not going to go into it again, but I feel that the article we went over, I think it was 2 sessions ago, uh, uh, that Pepe Escobar wrote for the Cradle, how Yemen changed everything, should be read by everyone, again, in light of this new article. Because when you put the two together, and you put the broad scope of both, okay, together, I think you get a better understanding of what is happening in the world in terms of the broad patterns, okay, of geopolitics. So I've listed that article, okay, in the description here, but I'm not going to cover it again, okay, today because, of course, we lack time. We are, now approaching, okay, 11 o'clock, and so it's getting to be time for me to say goodbye. Uh, any comments, Dee? Is there anything you would like to add?
No, everything was fine. I think you did a good job.
Okay, I thought the articles tonight were incredible. I mean, all
Yeah.
three. I thought they were just fantastic pieces, and I'm happy to be able to present them. I only regret that there were too few people here to experience this. And
Tonight was a night that, yeah, even on my show, there weren't a lot of people on. It just, well, it's Tuesday. I don't know why it's quiet tonight. Something must be on that's quiet. Or they're doing something.
yeah, it could be. It could also be. It's just the day after New Year's, and people haven't quite come back yet to what they normally do.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm going to see what kind of views we've gotten on Twitter for this. Okay, I've been noting recently that the YouTube views I'm getting are very low. The Facebook views are better, okay, are somewhat better, but the real place where I'm getting the majority of my views now is actually by streaming to Twitter.
Yeah, I noticed my stream on Twitter has gone up too. I think more people are on Twitter these days, I guess.
I don't know if it's more people who are on Twitter or that the two of us have a better presence on Twitter than we have on Facebook, okay, and YouTube.
Yeah, that's true.
Over a period of time, a lot of our marketing has actually been devoted, okay, to Twitter, and I think it's starting to show. So,
Hmm.
but anyway, I'll check that out. So, I think that's all for tonight. Kay says Kay's still here, was hanging in at 11 o'clock. Thank you, Kay. She says, night. Okay, I love you all. Okay, thank you, Kay. We love you too, as always.
Hmm.
And I will see you tomorrow with the Dump the Corrupt show. Well, I'm sorry,
Please
Dump the
hit.
Corruption show. I've already got it planned. And okay, I even have uh, I'm well into planning the Thursday show as well. Okay, I think tomorrow, if I can give a preview, okay, is going to be another show where uh, okay, I'm focusing on what's going on with the 14th Amendment, okay, and the movement to try to short circuit the fascism threat to the United States through the operations, okay, of lawfare. And there's a lot of news, okay, in that area. Uh, of course, okay, I want to cover that. It's also relevant, though, okay, to dump the corruption, because what all of us has to understand is that even given the mass base that Trump has and uh, the commitment to his fascism, which he has built up over a period of time, uh, actually partly through his encouraging of violence, okay, in our political system, that that sort of support for fascism is maintained and accelerated by all the money, that he has to spend. He would be nothing if he was not able to raise essentially billions of dollars for his coming campaign. So the underside of all this is that his move to the fore and his ability to stay in front is fueled by his access to the big money. And if we had, a dump the corruption movement, there would be no chance for him to win in 2024, just as there would be no chance for Joe Biden to win in 2024. They would both be gone.
Mm-hmm.
Most of the Congress would be gone. 1/3 of the Senate would be gone, and the other 2/3 would be frightened out of their mind by the dump the corruption movement. And we would have a United States that would be moving towards different things, much more hopeful things. It would be a United States that would be ready to take on the great work, the Green Revolution, and the great work of integrating the Americas into a collaborative powerhouse that would be doing things for the people, of the Americas, and doing things, in accordance with the public purposes of all the nations, of the Americas. That is great work that we have to look forward to here, and that we can't be about as long as the kind of fascism that's represented by Trump and the kind of fascism that's represented by Biden is dominating, our electoral landscape. Because, make no mistake about it, uh, the way Biden governs and the way the allied groups with him, are governing presents to us a kind of soft sort, of fascism. Its violence is not so naked, but its repression is there. Its control of free speech and free press is there. Its control, of an economy based on austerity, is there. So there's a family resemblance between the way the Democrats and Biden have chosen to govern and the way that Trump, would also choose to govern. Of course, the violence in a Trump regime will be much more naked, and the repression, will be much more naked. Many of us will find places in newly constructed concentration camps. If Trump has, a second term and gets to institutionalize the kind of fascism, that he represents. But both types of fascism, soft kind, that's been referred to by Sheldon Wallen as inverted totalitarianism, and the hard kind, the Mussolini type, of fascism that we see from Trump. Both of them are still fascism, and we have to be committed to fighting, them both. So, on that note, I'm going to say goodnight. I said more than I should about fascism, tonight, but that will be a concern of mine uh, going all through up, to this election period and beyond, because the threat from fascism now for the United States is so palpable. We can practically taste it.
And if you get a chance, please, please, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share.
And please do buy us some coffees. we would love to have some coffees. Uh,
Yeah, I'm
anyway,
buymeacoffee.com, and I'm the Slam Bar D Piers.
okay, and
Yeah,
buymeacoffee.com/joe.firestone.
and also contribute to Joe's Patreon account.
Yes, please do that. Okay, as well, and please do contribute to Dee's Cash App account,
And
which
thank you.
she recently established. What is your the identifier for your Cash App account?
Actually, it's Dolores Piers. It's DOLORES Piers.
Okay, so thank you, Dee, and I think I'll see you tomorrow for your show, right?
Yes, yes, you will.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nan.
Thank you.
I think it's time to say good night.
I think so too. And good night to Bonnie as well.
Good night.
See you all tomorrow.
Bye.